So we're gathered for another sculpture forum, and we've been to Alexander Gray Associates Gallery in New York to see an exhibition of sculpture by Melvin Edwards. And I am gathered to talk about it via Zoom with my usual compatriots. Jock Ireland, thank you, Jock. Brandt, Junceau, thank you, Brandt. And we are being recorded, and our discussion will be edited by Rachael Bohlander. Thank you so much, Rachael, for doing this. So I've been aware of Melvin Edwards' work for quite some time and seen, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 exhibitions of his work in different locations at different times, and been intrigued by it. This is a small exhibition. I think there were 3 freestanding pieces and a number of these small-ish wall-mounted pieces that he has been making over a long period of time. I'm going to open it up now to my colleagues to jump in here and talk about them. Anybody?
Yeah, well, we talked about, or began to talk about the show after we visited it several weeks ago. And Garth, you and Brandt got into a discussion about or what are called, about the smaller pieces in the show. They're called the Lynch fragments, but Brandt said they were heads, and you kind of objected to that. And I think that's maybe an interesting place to start.
Well, I'm not sure that I objected to it, but I did kind of question it. I mean, they're almost kind of signature works of Melvin Edwards, although he's done quite a variety of work. But these are the things that I think I associate with him most directly, immediately, and clearly. And I've always thought of them as sort of potentially heads, potentially masks, but there's also something else that they're not obviously. Mostly I find them really kind of very powerful objects and scary. They seem to speak very directly about, I don't know, it's the kind of way in which we can be brutal and cruel to each other. There's a horrible history that they evoke. Brandt, heads?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any doubt about it. And the fact that they have the title Lynch fragments makes me think of a head, at a bit of a twist and downcast, which they often seem to be. The one thing I was struck by at the exhibition, I walked from one piece to the other, always within arm's reach, which it seemed to me that the piece imposes on the viewer, that they, demand this, being taken within intimate space, like, eye to eye. And then from across the room, one is struck at how relatively small they are on the wall, and that they almost seem to need to be closer space than one thinks of them in emotional space. I mean, for me, walking from one to the other, I imagine the space between them was larger than it was.
They do seem to require a kind of, quite intimate, quite close encounter. The complexity, the density, the variety of them, the variety of things they contain, variety of forms, shapes, fragments that they contain. They're dense, they're complex, they're compact, and they do not come to life until you get, as you suggest, Brandt, I think, within sort of arm's reach of them, or even closer than that.
And at that point, they seem much larger than they really are, to be, you know, kind of an almost all over experience, as though they were broader than oneself. It struck me really powerfully that scale is really extraordinarily congenial to him, and is as considered and thoughtful, you know, as masterful as the larger pieces are. They don't have that kind of emotional impact. Although, I mean, I see some of the same, you know, I see the same mind at work in them, but there's somehow the compression of those heads. I mean, it just goes to another place.
Yeah, there's compression, and there's the fact that they're on the wall. And, you know, are they reliefs or are they sort of freestanding heads? And you know, you're forced to kind of face them because they're on the wall in an interesting way. And
well, the thing about them being on the wall is that you're obliged to confront them in a way, isn't it? I mean, you're obliged to confront them, you know, in a way that is different from engaging a work in the round. I mean, although these things are, you know, they're very three-dimensional and they change dramatically from side to side, but nevertheless, that sensation of walking up to it and being confronted by it is important, and the fact that they are confined to the wall, it seems to add to their power rather than imposing a kind of constraint on them. I mean, I'm talking about the Edwards pieces. The fact that they are, it seems to me, the fact that they are attached to the wall, you know, that seemed to be a relevant factor in my experience of them. They're held there in a way that seems relevant.
I mean, they have a really not just a nightmarish, but a highly interior quality, and it feels that the interior space feels vast. The interior space of the pieces, you know, though it's like it's maybe 12 inches front to back, but I mean, it feels like worlds.
yeah, but it's not space. There's a kind of density that is, I don't know, captivating. It's really material. It's insistently there.
Well, it's complex because the space in those wall-mounted masks, heads, objects, there isn't much. They are dense. They are compact. But the space is, it seems to me, kind of like the object, like the thing. It's compressed. It feels compressed. Everything feels compressed.
Yeah.
Squeezed. And you know, to a degree that is almost scary. You said nightmarish, Brandt, and then you seem to withdraw that. notion, but it's not completely out of the question. I think
No,
they
no.
they are frightening, not frightening, but they are about some kind of horror,
Terror.
terror.
I mean, there's the social terror, the historical terror they refer to, and then there's they're so formidable, it's so intimidating in themselves. It's a kind of a, terror of recognition and identification.
Yeah, but they also feel dangerous, don't they? They also feel
Yeah.
dangerous. That's another complication, is that they feel dangerous. That they almost seem as if at times they might be weapons.
And I do find, Jock, the effect to be, as concretely as possible, to be magical, and yet he does very little to convert the materials to anything else. So, a nail is a nail.
Yeah,
The found steel is frankly itself.
yeah. A bit of chain is a bit of chain. A hook,
Yeah.
padlock is a padlock, and so on. Yeah.
Almost, but they're welded together. There's there's a sense that things are coming out from the wall, is rather than sort of going into the wall, is, I don't know, is interesting to me. But it's also just an interesting formal quality about them.
Yeah, no, what you say, Jock, is correct. I mean, I think that while the elements that these pieces are made up from remain clearly identifiable and not in any way, modified to the point of being disguised, they do get integrated into a total thing, which offers itself as a singular entity made up of identifiable bits and pieces. Whatever, horseshoe, clamp, screws, and so on. But they do end up as a you don't end up reading them by putting the parts together. You read it as a whole, and then you kind of figure out, what that whole is composed of, rather than seeing the parts and then trying to figure out a total. They seem so different in feeling from the freestanding works that I found that quite remarkable, and I consistently found that in Edwards's work, when I've seen it before, that these wall-mounted Lynch fragments seem to have a life that is quite separate from the freestanding works that I've encountered, which seem to be much more, I don't know what the word is, relaxed. They too are very strange things. The three pieces in this show are pretty strange objects, but they didn't grip me in the way these things, or haunt me in the way these things do.
Yeah, I really liked one of them. I forget the title, but it's the one that's sort of closest to the ground, and on this sort of rocking base. And he does a lot of, or he's done a lot of things with that kind of rocker bass. And the one in the show was delightful. Just as exciting for me as the wall pieces.
Yeah, that was the one that I liked most as well. And did think worked really well. But it seems to fit within the kind of canon of abstract steel sculpture, from Smith, Caro, and on, quite comfortably. And it's a great work. I mean, it's a fine piece of work, I think, but intriguing, engaging, but it doesn't have, for me, it didn't have the power of these wall pieces. The third freestanding piece in the show, was interesting because it seemed to be, in a way, one of these potentially wall fragment headpieces on a sort of pedestal, a made pedestal, a stand that it, but it seemed to have to be another way of engaging that material. The wall pieces are made out of, but putting it on a sort of table, and it was very different. Maybe I'm being unfair.
No, it was different, but it seemed too derivative. It seemed very David Smith.
I'm very fond of Smith, but I found this a independent experience, and also it's like a case of one poet picking up another's theme and restating it for himself. I really took it as a work table, and it strikes me more looking at the images now that there's a kind of a mastermind or an onlooker who's working over the elements on the table, which are kind of sanguine and body-like, and then there's a kind of a lens-like, eye-like, oculus apparatus that's in control of it. It has some of that kind of pessimistic malice that the headpieces have.
Yeah, that was what I was picking up on. And I mean, of course, Smith is present throughout, inescapable. But that doesn't mean that, in any sense, that this work isn't clearly its own. Whatever debt it owes to Smith is, the debt we all owe to Smith.
Edwards isn't ensnared in this drama of self the way that Smith is. I think that's part of the power of these pieces. They're really extraordinarily they have extraordinary ability to I don't know what, make this identification with the viewer. I mean, the viewer engages in the drama of the piece as if it were himself, as if his person were at risk.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are a lot of people making good welded steel sculpture. Much of it tends to be academic. These pieces, particularly these war pieces, are distinctive. They separate themselves from all of that. They are a unique and very distinctive contribution to to that arena of activity. And in a way, they don't even seem to be about welded steel sculpture. They seem to be, they are welded steel for the most part. Maybe other metals in there too, here and there. But that's not how I think of them. They seem to separate themselves out and be about something. They they have an emotional component.
I'm with you in the sense that Edward's work is, first about something else and then about formal issues. But it's, more often than not, that whole, it's just, that's a big issue with abstract art and representational, figurative, however you want to describe what might be the opposite of abstract art. I came across this essay that Alan Jock wrote, and he quotes Patrick Heron. I think I would even say that if the impulse to create abstract form is not opposed and retarded by an insistent contemplation of exterior reality, if the painter or sculptor, that is, concedes unbridled expression to any single set of impulses at the expense of another set, in ceasing to force them to come to terms with or find their outlet through manifestations of an opposite nature, if that objective relation with phenomena, which the discipline of observation establishes for an artist, is not sufficiently strong, then subjectivity will lead to abstraction, an abstraction of a kind that will yield only monotonous repetition. Alan thought of Patrick Heron as one of the great critics of the 20th century. But, do you agree, Garth?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I think the quote is. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with it at all. It made sense to me, and followed from what I was saying. I thought, and there's to the point in relation to these works that we're talking about, which are, are anything but kind of formal exercises. However satisfying they are formally, and they are,
Yeah.
that's not how one engages them. That's a secondary kind of take. Let me see what it is I'm actually seeing here. After you've been kind of prodded by them, like cattle prod, they come at you, these things, and they kind of like don't let you go. I think they're remarkable, and he's been making them over a long period of time. It seems to me the dates of these things. There's a kind of consistent engagement with this theme of whatever you want to call it: head, mask, fragment, there must be a lot of them. There were, what, in this show, maybe a dozen, but there must be a lot more. And they're not repetitive either, which is remarkable. They don't follow one from another. Each one seems to be a unique experience. That's my last word.
Yeah, and I think that's a good last word.
Brandt?
Well, I don't want to interfere with the last word.
Should we stop recording and really say what we think now?